keying of all thank you for joining us. You're watching Safiya Breakfast Show. Now, our first interview here, we have Dr. Lionel Rawlins, VonFrederick, who is a security expert with the American University of Nigeria. And this morning, we'll be looking at mental illness and violence in Nigeria. But first, we have to talk about the iPhones. I'm so interested in this story. Good morning, Rawlins.
Good morning.
Morning. Good
to have you on the show. Yeah.
Nice to have you here with us again. It's been a while.
But you all are looking wonderful, as expected, eh?
You're not looking bad either. Thank you very much. All right, we had a report earlier on talking about smartphones. We have people in US, we have people in China or the Asian countries that are the, famous and best customers when you talk about iPhones. The market is so high there, and we have people queuing up throughout the night to get these phones for themselves. And my Grace here said she wouldn't do that.
And I would like to throw the question to him. Would you, Lionel, queue up overnight to get the new iPhone?
No, I wouldn't.
Why?
Do it. Because I'm too old to do that.
But I'm sure you use smartphones.
But yes, but the smartphone, I like it. I would rather pay someone to go and queue up for me, but I wouldn't do it. Although I've queued up for a Michael Jackson ticket years ago. I sat in line for 12 to 15 hours.
Okay.
So I'm glad I was able to do that, because now he's dead, and I could say I saw Michael Jackson.
Yeah, before he died. At least it was worth it.
Right. But for the phone, for some people it's worth it, And some people do it as a business. They will queue up in line for like 10 different people, and you'll pay them to queue up in line for you. And some people will queue up in line to buy several for themselves and then resell it to other people. And that is why they will say only one per customer or two per customer.
Okay.
Right. So, but with this new iPhone 5S and 5C, do you think it will help maybe stop hacking security-wise, or do you think, because it has to do with your thumbprints, you alone can access that phone, do you think it will stop hacking?
Well, it wouldn't really stop hacking, but it will minimize it. It's a way to cut down on hacking, but more so, people stealing your information, and so if you lost your phone, people will not be able to get in. Or people will borrow your phone to make a phone call, and if your back is turned, they tend to look through your photos to see what kind of personal photos or messages or texts you have. And you usually find out with boyfriend, girlfriend things. Usually the normal average person will not try to go through your photos. It was usually a jealous boyfriend or girlfriend.
So we hope to see less problems in relationships with the new iPhone.
Or more problems, because now they can't get into your phone to see what's going on.
So they will definitely want to
create
ask
distrust, and why?
Then the fighting begins.
All right.
So it's better to have your phone, not really secured, but so that there wouldn't be more fighting and all that in terms of relationship.
But it's a good safety measure. You know, we're getting better every year in terms of the safety measures that we. 5 years ago, we had none.
That's true.
So you can imagine. So 5 years from now, your phone will be probably just only accessible to your eyes. When you look at it, it turns it on.
All right.
But during sorry, we have to talk about this. When people were still on the queue, we had robbers coming to rob them. Like, okay, since you have money to stay on the line for as long as more than 12 hours or so,
then give us some of it.
Hand over your wallets and your phones and
your tablets.
The robbers, usually is a lot of people in line, so the robbers will have to rob a lot of people, because it's usually 300 to 400 people standing in line. Actually, and it depends. For the iPhone, you might find probably 2,000 or 3,000 people, because they have that. They will say the first 2,000 or 3,000 phones will be coming in, and that many people will be in line. So you'll have to rob a lot of people, and I don't think you'll be successful at it. Maybe you can rob them as they leave the store with the phones.
Oh, okay. But we had a robbery incident there. Reports on a robbery incident in one of the countries, and so they were able to do away with some people's properties and items there.
That is true. All right, now back to the topic of discussion. We are talking mental illness and violence in Nigeria, but we sure will relate it to other countries, because they do happen everywhere, not only in Nigeria. But I don't really think I've heard of any serious case when you talk about mental illness and maybe someone taking his own life or going on the streets to cause any harm to people. But what do you think really constitutes mental illness?
Well, there are many different factors that constitute mental illness, and it depends on the individual, but there are three main factors that have to combine with each other. One is biological, next one is psychological, and then social or environmental. So biological means something's wrong with your head, you lost a screw, as they say. Psychological, there was something traumatic in your life that took place, like you lost a loved one. And social, which is you lost a job or something of the sort. So these three factors must be in place to create that mental illness. And those three factors, what they do, they come together and they create a chemical imbalance in the brain. And the chemical in the brain is called neurotransmitters, and they transmit messages in the brain from one side to the other with the nerves. And the messages that are, like right now, messages in our brain is being transmitted back and forth, so we know what kind of questions to ask and how to answer it. And it tells us when to stop, when to go, when to turn right or turn left. But in the mind of a person who is sick, the messages could be distorted. It's poorly received or poorly understood. And so that is why they act the way they act. Now, for you and I, if we see a car coming across the street, we stop. The message sent to us from the brain is stop. Well, for a mentally ill person, it's go. So he goes,
so it's the other way around.
Right, and he gets hit. Or he may see a man coming down the street, and the message, you and I will see a man walking on the street. But for the crazy person, well, you're not supposed to use the word crazy. It's supposed to be mental. Then, he sees that person, and what he sees is a demon that must be killed. So he just walks up to the man and starts chopping him to death. Yeah,
the issue of seeing someone as a demon brings us to brings me to the question if it could be spiritual. Could mental illness be caused? Could it have some spiritual attachment, or maybe coming from?
That is a very good question. It depends on where in the world you're from. If you're from Nigeria, then it's spiritual or Jew. If you're from the Western world, then you're sick. But juju, in my mind, does not cause somebody to lose their mind.
Okay.
It does not. It's And this goes back to years now. This idea about spiritual illness and juju goes back to 5000 BC. You know, they used to think that you were possessed by a demon, and they even actually performed surgery back then. What they would do, they'd take something similar to a nail and pound it into your skull until it goes into your brain and pull it out. And when the fluid comes out, they'll say that's a demon coming out of you. And how we know that? Because they've found skeletal remains with these kind of treatment, and then that led to a lobotomy where they cut out a whole side of your brain and try to treat you, and you get worse as a result of that because people were experimenting with your brain before they even know what it was. But this is what happens. But let me ask you a question. Do you know why they call crazy people lunatics?
No, not really.
You ever heard the term lunatic?
Lunar moon, is it lunar moon or something?
That's right.
Maybe during that period is when, is that right?
That's perfect. That's right. Because the moon is lunar. They refer to the moon as lunar. Okay. And there's a feeling that crazy people become active when the moon is full.
Oh.
Mentally ill people.
Oh, mentally ill. You can't say crazy people. No lunatics. You can't call them lunatics. No madmen or mad people. They're mentally ill people.
Okay.
Or jujuized people.
All right. So there was an instance where someone says, some people I know that if you want to get married, they try to inquire into the family history from generations before your time to see if there was any mad person or any mentally retarded person or any mentally ill person, however you want to use it, whatever word you want to use that best suits. And then if there is a history of that, sometimes parents go as far as stopping their children from marrying into that family. So we have a problem of some people thinking it's hereditary. You could inherit it from a relative if you have a trace by blood, whatever, if there is a history of mental illness in your family. So is it hereditary?
Yes. And you're right. Don't marry a crazy man. Because your children, they're going to become crazy. One or two of them, maybe all of them will become crazy. Yes. There is a gene that is inherited by, if your grandfather was crazy, that gene is passed down, and you will inherit it. And if we have children, our children will inherit it. Either one or all of them is going to inherit it.
Not minding whatever could have been the cause of the problem, the illness.
If, let's say, I was crazy because of drugs and alcohol, because drug and alcohol do contribute to you being crazy or you being mentally ill. But for the most part, it is hereditary, and that's what causes the problems. And yes, it's not just in Nigeria, by the way, it's all over the world. There was a time when people would not let their family member marry another person who was predisposed to the gene. Because if your father had it or your mother had it, maybe you have it too. And that is one of the problems we have, especially here in Nigeria. It is stigmatized. No one will ever tell anybody that they have a crazy member of the family, because you don't want them to mess up your chances of marriage and living a good social life. Okay. That's why they used to lock them in dungeons, by the way, and hide them.
Well, earlier you mentioned some of the things that constitute mental illness as maybe psychological, maybe societal, and all that. But what really causes? Can one of this constituents of mental illness really, make someone go totally mental?
We used to think that that one can do it, like maybe biological. But after a lot of research has been done, there's a lot of psychiatrists and clinical psychologists doing a lot of studies, and they realize that you need more than one component. You need at least two, but definitely three. If three of them are there, those three factors, it's going to drive you crazy. 2, there's a possibility. 1, not really so.
Okay.
Not really.
So at what point would you say one is completely
Crazy?
Yeah, crazy.
We have different...
You seem to be more comfortable with the word crazy.
Yeah, mentally ill. Yeah, because we use the word crazy. It's still difficult to get that out of our minds that that person is crazy. Well, you can go all the way from OCD, which is a mild form of compulsive disorder. Like you don't want anybody touching your hand, and every time somebody shakes your hand, you wash it. Or if somebody touches your table, you clean it up quickly. That's obsessive compulsive disorder. That's a form of mental illness. It's not normal. For every time someone touches you, you have to wash your hand.
No, I'm scared.
Some people,
now.
You do that?
Yeah, not me, but I've seen someone who tends to be not really close to me, but a bit close to me, and it's I should always be cleaning up and wiping and all that. If you should touch her, I say, well, I know that the table is, and
it's
I
a
thought the
compulsive
person
disorder,
is normal.
and that's not normal. That is not normal, because that will lead to other things. So that is a very mild form of mental illness. You have a middle ground, which is depression, and then you have the extreme, which is schizophrenia. That's where they'll kill you. And that's where the problem becomes a problem.
Okay. Now let's also look at mental illness and psychological trauma. What is the relationship, or how could you relate mental illness to psychological trauma?
Because psychological trauma is if you lost a loved one. A woman loses a husband. She loved him very much. He can drive her crazy. A child lost both of her parents in a car accident, and you're just 8 years old. And the two people in your life, the two most significant people in your life, were just snatched away. That can drive you, can give you some psychological trauma. A man who goes to war and you saw your friends blown up in front of you, or you see things that you come back. These are the psychological traumas that can transform to mental illness at some point in time if it's triggered in you. I have been to combat. I've had the opportunity to smell bodies burning. So anytime I go to a barbecue, or sometimes if I'm driving by or walking by and I smell suya, or just the smoke, it triggers like a 5-second flashback of something I've seen. And that is just me. There are people who that 5-second flashback can be 5 days. You see? For me, it's 5 seconds. For other people, it could be 5 days. And that is when you've gone overboard.
Okay. All right. I'm sure you must have heard about Aaron Alexis, a guy, a contracted naval officer that went into the Navy Yard in the U.S. and just shot dead 12 people, and many others were injured. But we have this report on that same guy, and then we'll come to talk about it. Let's take the report.
As investigators sift through the evidence in the Navy Yard killings, Navy officials say damage inside Building 197 is so extensive it may take weeks to repair and reopen it. One official saying, "There is blood everywhere. There is damage everywhere." The mother of the gunman apologizing Wednesday to the families of the victims.
I don't know why he did what he did, and I'll never be able to ask him why. Aaron is now in a place where he can no longer do harm to anyone, and for that I am glad. To the families of the victims, I am so very sorry that this has happened. My heart is broken.
FBI. Investigators still don't know why. Law enforcement sources say nothing points to a specific motive for the rampage, even after the seizure of Aaron Alexis's computer and other possessions, and interviews with the social contacts for clues. Yet odd details are emerging. A federal law enforcement source tells CNN Alexis made unexplained etchings into the shotgun he used in the attack. The etchings read, "Better off this way," and "My elf weapon." Investigators don't know what the sayings are supposed to mean. Still, questions remain about whether the rampage could have been prevented. Navy officials in Rhode Island never passed along police reports about Alexis' erratic behavior, claiming he was hearing voices.
Where there are gaps, we will close them. Where there are inadequacies, we will address them. And where there are failures, we will correct them. We owe the victims, their families, and all our people nothing less.
New details have emerged suggesting authorities might have been able to contain the gunman more quickly. A government official tells CNN when the first radio call came in about a shooting at the Navy Yard, highly trained tactical Capitol Police officers attempting to help stop the rampage were told by a watch commander to stand down. The Capitol Police Chief has ordered an independent fact review of their response and the critical first moments after the shooting was reported.
All right, that was the report on Aaron Alexis, a 34-year-old contracted naval officer that said he was hearing voices from the walls, from the ground, and he was just hearing voices all over the place and could not help it. Though he was reportedly to be having a mental illness before he committed that act. What do you make of mental illnesses, hearing voices, and suicide?
Good question. Now, what happened there at the Navy Yard can happen anywhere if you don't take the proper procedures to prevent it. Alexis was diagnosed as being, not crazy, it's crazy, but mental illness. It was a fact, it was a known fact. He's been treated for it before. And secondly, he had a run-in with police. He had a law enforcement problem with a gun before in Seattle, Washington, where he shot out somebody's car tire because they had an argument. After that, he did it again in the state of Indiana. He shot a gun through his apartment, and the bullet went up into the other, and could have killed someone. He said it was an accidental discharge of the weapon. But all of these are indicators that tells you we have a dangerous individual here with us. And then he goes to work in the Navy Yard, where there's, first of all, where he was working in the Navy Yard is a highly sensitive area, and only certain people with certain clearances can go in there, because that's where they make submarine parts and all that stuff, and sonars and all that stuff. So he must have had a good clearance. A man like him should not have had that kind of clearance with that history of mental illness, because this is the end result of mental illness. And in the United States, where guns are many, you find that there's a thing called violence in the workplace, where this happens almost on a weekly basis, where someone goes into the office and kills everyone.
That is
Okay,
true.
so would
before
you
now, the U.S. mentioned something about gun control, but nothing happened afterwards, after the whole talk about the issue of gun control, and we still have these guns. Everybody can walk into a shop and just get a gun for self-protection, as they call it.
We have a Second Amendment that says everybody has a right to bear arms. And everybody has a right to own a weapon to protect your family. I believe that. I'm a supporter of that Second Amendment.
All right, but in this case where we have more incidences of shootouts, you see people, and most of these shootouts or suicide that people commit through gunshots. There was a case of a kid, I saw an interview on CNN recently of a kid who killed himself, actually, because he had mental illness too. He had some sort of mental illness. And you have more of these cases on the increase. Does it not call for this gun control we're talking about? Because, like you said, it's because they have easy access. In Nigeria, we have mentally ill people too, but you hardly find cases of people shooting out or just carrying guns to shoot because they've got mental illness. Rather, you see them maybe misbehaving and be going on tattered clothes and just walking on the streets. And should there be this gun control? Is the call for gun control wrong?
Yes. In Nigeria, they don't shoot because they don't have guns, but they stab people and beat them up beat them to death.
Okay.
Because if they had a gun, they would just shoot them. I'd rather you shoot me than beat me to death with a piece of iron. Because it's bloody, messy, and painful.
Okay.
And just to shoot me, I'm done, you know. But to beat me to death is a problem. And that's what the crazy people do here. That's the outreach of violence that they do here. In the United States, we have more access to guns. The problem is not the gun itself, is people who, like Alexis, who we just saw, he somewhere along the way was treated. But there's some laws called HIPAA laws, H-I-P-P-A, where the psychologist or psychiatrist who treats you is not allowed to divulge any kind of information about you. It's a doctor-patient privilege. So I could, if you told me, I'm going to go tell tomorrow, and I'm going to take an AK-47, I'm going to kill Victor and everybody else. If I am your psychiatrist, I cannot say anything.
Why? You can stop you?
I must stop you. I can tell you, don't do it, please. For the love of God, don't do it.
And that's right. And
that's it. But I can't go to you and tell you that she is coming in to shoot up the place, because then I violated her rights as a patient. And I can't go to the police and say, Grace said she's coming to shoot up the place, because then I violated your rights. So I just have to wait until
and then you violated the people's rights, who are going to be the victim at the end of the day, not
so you see how,
them.
Exactly. So you see how messed up it is. I have to wait and see that she comes in and really follows through with the threat. And after she kills about 10 people, then I will
come out and
she said that.
She told me she was going to do it.
Wow.
After the damage.
The damage must have been done.
So that, you know, they're focusing incorrectly on the guns. But if they were to tell people that Grace has had some mental issues and is particularly violent and will kill people one day at some point in time, then they will have all of that in the database, and they know not to sell you a gun. You see? But if you really want a gun, you can also get a gun, because you can just go on the street and buy a gun. You might not get it from the lawful, legal people. Now, in terms of the gun control, everybody has a right to protect the house and protect the property. And so I know people don't like that, but it's good. And I think it's a good thing. I have about 25 weapons in my house.
Wow.
No, they're not loaded or anything. But they're just collector's items.
Okay.
We need to open a museum where
There's a museum, yeah. I have some from the 1800s and stuff.
All right, let's look at, back to business now. Let's look at, is anyone immune to mental illness?
None of us are immune to mental illness, because all it takes is something. You can, as you're walking down the steps today, you can fall down, and if you hit your head and you hit it in the wrong place and at the right intensity, it can affect you from now for the rest of your life, where you do not function properly. And so a lot of sports people, in the United States, a lot of former ex-football players who've had some really crushing blows to the head from the helmets meeting, they're now examining the brain of the dead ones to see what impact this has had on their brain, because many of them have killed themselves. Many of them have killed themselves, and put a gun and they shot themselves to death. And they are now figuring out that it is from the constant beating of the head. So to answer whether you're immune, it can be a fall, it can be sports. You can get, there's a disease called, bacteria called streptococcus. If you inherit that, it goes into your brain, it can send you crazy. And it can happen to any one of us. It depends where you are. It could be from water you drink. It can be from shaking somebody's hand that use the bathroom and didn't wash their hands. So you can get it from, that we call it an infectious type collaboration.
All right, let's quickly talk about, some of the warning signs, some of the things you see, and you know that, okay, this person is in this state of mind, and then how we can prevent them from harming themselves or other people?
If people who are going crazy or mentally ill, they start to act differently. They either start talking to themselves, they start being withdrawn, they start looking disheveled, they don't comb their hair, they don't take showers, they don't care how they look, how they feel, how they dress. These are indications that something, especially if you know the person and you know this person to be well-groomed, well-manicured, of someone who's very careful about the way they look, and then all of a sudden there is a 180-degree, that is a problem. That tells you something's wrong with that person. You need to step in. And what you don't have to wait until they start killing people or really going downhill to stop them. Stop them initially by seeking help. Here, what people do in Nigeria, they go to herbalists and traditional medicine, or they may go to the church, the mosque, and try to get some intervention there. But the best intervention is to take him to a trained professional who is trained to examine the mind and the behavior, psychiatrists, psychologists, and let them take it from there. And the best way they can treat you is give you medication.
Okay. Interesting. Now that we have the best way of treating mental health or mental illness, then we sure will be able to cut down on the rate of casualties we have at the end of the day. I want to thank you very much, Dr. Lionel, for coming on the show.
You know, you can send people crazy just by breaking their hearts. I'm sure you've done many you have done that before.
No.
That's a personal issue now and then.
Maybe after the show.
No breaking of hearts.
All right.
Thank you all the same. We'll take a break now. When we return, Safiya will continue. Stay with us.